First off, can you guys hear me in the back? I can enunciate even louder if you need me to. All right, awesome. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'm JD. All right, I know Lon gave you my long Italian last name. Everybody calls me JD except for my wife, and that's only when she's angry at me. So we'll talk about the regulation of multi-semester athletes, okay? First off, I got to say my thank yous. Thank you for Lon and Hammer Strength. Again, we've never missed an opportunity to come to a Hammer Strength conference since I started at Princeton. And they just, I mean, this conference puts out top-notch information. And that's really where we're at. This field, we get better by talking. Right? We get better by talking shop to each other. We get better by making relationships. And that's what these Hammer Strength clinics affords us to do. I'd like to thank the Philadelphia Eagles performance staff and say congratulations on winning the biggest title in the world. That's awesome. Congratulations. And that's coming from a Giants fan. I'd like to thank the Princeton University performance staff. All right. Jason Gallucci and Angie Bramley-Moyer gave me my opportunity to be on the stage. Just to give you an idea, I am one of the very few people who are still at where they started, all right, and where they started as an intern. I was born and raised in Princeton, New Jersey. So for the fact that I've literally been there for all 32 years of my life, and I get to wake up and every day get to go to a place that I love, and I have a deep familial connection with. Angie gave me my start when I was in grad school, and I can't thank her enough. But the entire performance staff at Princeton, I want to thank. I want to thank our presenters, everybody who's here. You guys are brave enough to share just a little bit of what we're trying, what we do, right? You guys are seeing less than 10% of what we do, right? But the fact of the matter is everybody is gracious enough to let us get an idea. You know, Isaac Newton has the great quote, "We see farther because we stand on the shoulders of giants," right? That's what we do. That's what these clinics, the purpose of these clinics is so that we can take from people that are really innovative in this field and then use it and be creative and make it unique to ourselves. You're going to see in this presentation, you're going to see a lot of recycled information, right? You're going to see a lot of, if you've watched an NSCA conference, and I'd like to thank Coach Caulfield and the NSCA for putting these on, right? You're going to see a lot of information that has been presented before, okay, and how we make it unique to Princeton University, right? At Princeton, it's very, very different than even most Division I institutions, all right? And I'll show you how we do that, all right? And then my 3 favorite people on the planet, Crystal, Maddie, and Brendan. That's my wife, my daughter, my son. I'd like to thank them too. So what are we talking about when we talk about the regulation of multi-semester athletes, right? I'm going to give you a little bit of what this presentation actually is, right? So we're talking about our winter sport athlete. I primarily deal with winter sport athletes, and with our winter sport athletes, they start in October, and if they're lucky, they're still playing right now, right? So how do we afford to get stronger during all this time where we don't have a lot of time with our athletes, right? This is not, this is a view into how we use autoregulation to maximize our athletic potential. Now, I probably just lost a bunch of you when we talked about autoregulation because you're probably thinking, okay, he's at Princeton University, he gets all the toys, he has all this stuff. I can tell you right now, yes, do we have toys? Absolutely, and they're awesome to use, but we just got them this year. Right, I've been at Princeton for 8 years. I've been using this since I got my start as a strength coach. All right, so I'm going to show you guys, some of us who don't have, I know some of us don't have budgets at all. You know, some of us are probably working at high schools. Some of us are working independently, right? I'm going to give you guys some insight into how we can do this with people that don't have a budget or people that are afforded a modest budget like we are, so that we can, we're able to maximize our athletic potential, right? But what this is not, all right, is an excuse to get out of putting in maximum effort and mastering technique, right? These techniques that I'm going to show you are not used with my athletes until they can show me the latter two. Technical mastery of the movement and efficiency of that movement, right? And maximal effort, all right? The regulation techniques that we use will give us a better insight into what our athletes are doing when they are not with us. All right, and in a couple of slides, you'll see how much time my athletes are not with me, right? And then we're also looking at how effective is our programming from a holistic point of view. What I mean by a holistic point of view is we're looking at the sum of stressors for our athlete, right? So we put on a great number of mechanical stresses with our athletes, right? But there's emotional stress that's involved with training, right? There's psychological stress that happens outside of training when they're at home. Right, when they're out and we're expected to max out test and one of our athletes' dogs dies the day before, all right? They might not be as prepared from an emotional standpoint, right? And we have to account for that, right? So that's what we're looking for when we're talking about holistic view. We might have just we might have taken a team into 4 overtimes and lost, right? So from an emotional standpoint, the emotions are low, and we have to come in and train the next day. Right? So some of these things that I'm going to give you an idea of what we're going to look at here. So again, some more about the why. All right? Majority of our strength and conditioning coaches work with teams whose seasons span multi-semesters. All right? Even in our NCAA level, even those single semester sports, your fall sports, your footballs, all right, they have a spring game, right? Baseball always has a fall season. Tennis usually has seasons in both spring and the fall. How are we going to optimize training through these periods, right? High school coaches, you guys have athletes that play multiple sports, right? How are we going to maximize their athletic potential, all right? These situations limit our opportunities to assess whether or not our athletes are actually getting stronger. So the first thing we need to do is assess the needs of the sport, right? How much maximal strength do we really need? Do we need more repetitive strength? Do we need a combination of both, right? And then from there, how does our strength program complement our season? And that comes with talking to our athletes and talking with our coaches, right? Our goal is to maximize the potential of every day. And if we're not, overtraining can happen at a higher rate if this whole athlete is not assessed. So let's talk about Princeton University for a second, all right? Because as I said, we're a little bit unique in the sports that I work with. We have 37 varsity sports. We have 5 strength coaches who I work with. I work with men's basketball, baseball, wrestling, men's swimming, men's and women's diving, and men's and women's water polo. So I have a gamut of athletes that all have different demands, all right? And each one of those teams, I need to make sure that I'm meeting the demands of the sport so that we can optimally train, right? Issues that were faced at Princeton: high academic demand. You don't become the #1 undergraduate institution in the world without one, right? Frequent training interruptions, understaffed, coach and athlete communication, and athlete self-regulation. All right, I'm going to go over these and see how they can affect our training. All right, the one I'm not going to talk about, though, is understaffed. I'm going to wipe that one right out, okay, because I can look out, and I've actually reconnected with a friend of mine. He's got 1 strength coach for 24 sports. All right, so I can't complain that I've got 8 varsity sports. All right, I've got to find a way to make sure that our athletes get the most out of me as possible. Right, so I'm not going to address being understaffed. All right, right now we're going to talk about high academic demand and frequent training interruptions. So if you look, this is a 52-week year. This is our academic calendar. This is for baseball. Right? Anything in the red is when my athletes are not on campus. They are not with me. Anything in the blue are mandatory NCAA dead periods where we have to make training optional. Right? And unfortunately, we get those athletes that take advantage of that. Right? Anything in gold are when we're competing. Right? So anything in red and blue, that accounts for 24 weeks of a 52-week year. If you add gold, red, and blue, it comes out to 36 weeks in a 52-week year. So 36 weeks out of a 52-week year, all right, we have to dedicate and we have to make sure that performance in their sport is either being optimally assessed or they're not with me, all right, and I have to make sure that they're doing things safely and accounting for other types of stress that are going to be placed on them in forms of exam periods and the other dead periods. So we talk about autoregulation, right? And what exactly is autoregulation? And right now, I really want to just take some time to thank the people that are really, really getting into autoregulation and putting in the actual research behind this. People like Dr. Eric Helms, people like Dr. Brian Mann, people like the team at Kabuki Strength with Chris Duffin, okay? A lot of these guys are really, they're putting in the time to do the research so that we can look at this and substantiate it for ourselves. So what is it? I think this is the best quote that we can do: a structured approach for embedding a respect for individual variation within a program. All right, it's a respect for stress. All right, and again, stress comes in many different forms, right? I like to think of it as performance, athletic performance, holistically being a pool made of very small different sub-pools, right? And anytime you draw from one sub-pool, all right, it's going to come at the expense of another. Right? So the way that we can use autoregulation and maximize our potential, right? There's two types of autoregulation. There's subjective and there's objective. All right? These are the ones that I'm going to go over with our athletes that we do at Princeton. All right, so we'll first talk subjective autoregulation. You guys have probably all seen this before. All right, this is a rated perceived exertion scale. Okay, just going over real quick, this is the Borg rating of RPE. All right, originally designed for a hospital setting so they could perceive anything from taste to sensation, mainly pain, all right, and exercise, and place a quantifiable number towards it, right? We as strength coaches, you've probably seen the RPE scale that Mike Tuchscherer has adopted, which is the one on the bottom, okay? As strength coaches, we can use RPE to assess our athletes, right? So, again, we talked about using autoregulation, and there's a lot of great different tools and toys that you can play with. The easiest one that you can do, especially if you don't have a budget, but you have a pen and piece of paper and an Excel sheet, all right? RPE, you take whatever RPE scale that you want to do, whether you could do 1 to 5, 1 to 10, you could do 6 to 20, whatever it is, as long as you're consistent with that number, right? You can take that number that the athlete perceives and then multiply it by the duration of the workout, right? Then you can look for trends over time. If you're doing the same exact workout, all right, and the same exact workout's taking the same exact amount of time, and that athlete's either going up or down, right? If it's continually trending up, we might be leading to some overtraining here. So that's a conversation now that we need to have with an athlete. All right, if it's coming down, all right, and then we're looking at our strength levels, chances are our strength levels are getting stronger and we're adapting to that training method. All right, so again, it doesn't need to be done with a lot of fancy gadgets and whatnot. All right, it can be done with a piece of paper and an Excel sheet, right? All we need to do is be consistent and we need to track, right? So one of the main downfalls of RPE, all right, there's a lot of up to it, there's some down to it too, all right? At Princeton, because of that slide that I just showed you where they're not with us a lot, all right, our athletes tend to remain in the novice category with athletes, all right? We might get some that graduate up into that intermediate level, all right? But a lot of our novice athletes, because they're either the amount of training is so broken up, all right, they're going to perceive as everything is hard. Right? You take 2.5 weeks off of doing an exercise, right, and you come back into it, all right, those first couple of exercises are going to be perceived as hard, 8s and 9s, right? So with the novice level athlete and with the athletes that have a lot of intermittent change, all right, to their lifting schedules, all right, this might not be the best way to do it, all right? If it's your only way to do it, then by all means use it, right? By all means use it. Again, it's as long as you can try to administer it consistently, right, then we're able to now find and track longitudinally what some training stimuli. All right, so more importantly, though, we use the RIR scale, all right, in my weight room. So that's repetitions in reserve, gas in the tank, right? So if you look at that, the RIR scale on the bottom, all right, a 10 is your maxed effort. Right, at 10, you've left everything on that bar. That bar has stapled you to the floor, all right? You cannot pull another rep out of it. Right? And so on and so forth, you're going down, all right? So a 9, you could probably do 1 repetition. An 8, you could probably do 2 more, and so on and so forth, all right? And again, you can use these to track your athletes, their perceived level of exertion over time. The last one we'll talk about is, the next one we'll talk about is the survey method, all right? And this is what I absolutely love about the survey method, all right? And it allows communication between the athlete and the coach, right? It's no longer the coach's coach, right? It's no longer, we're gone is the day and age, right, of do this because I said so, right? Athletes that have athletes that'll give you the most buy-in are the athletes that feel that they have a say in all forms of their training, right? They're curious, and that's a great thing, right? So if you can have communication between your athlete, whether it's positive or negative, but it builds a rapport with your athlete, right? You're going to get a lot more buy-in from that athlete, okay? Take a second if we can just read this real quick, right, in italics, all right? Administered consistently, right, subjective measurements have been found to be more effective than objective measurements in response to both acute and training loads. This was done by a meta-analysis by Saw and colleagues in 2015, all right? It was published, and what they found was when administered consistently, the subjective scores that they were getting outweighed the objective biomarkers that they were finding as well, which, if anything, shows the high correlation between the psychological aspect and the physical aspect of strength training, right? So if you can get your athlete to if you can get some subjective data from your athlete and get them to be able to quantify it objectively, all right, now we can look linearly and see, all right, well, my athlete is, you know, underperforming in the weight room, and we're surveying then, and, you know, the past 3 weeks, we've seen that they've gotten consistently under 4 hours of sleep, and they're failing their hydration tests. All right, their perceived stress levels are at 5s, all right? Okay, well, now we know that their central nervous system and their autonomic nervous system is being stressed in a way that is not, that will not provide efficient training, all right? So again, if we're consistent with our administration, all right, and now we're also looking at the objective side of this, all right, we can be pointed in a further, they can point us further in the right direction with this. Great. So we have the benefit, all right, at Princeton. This year we started using a tool called Fit for 90, which is awesome, all right? If you look up on the, right where it says readiness breakdown, all right? So Fit for 90 gives athletes 5 subjective questions on fatigue, perceived levels of fatigue, soreness, mood, stress, and sleep quality, all right? What they do then is they're able to quantify that into a trend of a readiness score, all right? Is it perfect? No. Okay, is it perfect? No, we have had some issues with this, but it allows us to see trends, right? From that readiness score, it bands your athletes into red, all right? Red, we're at some kind of critical level here, all right? Yellow, we're in the middle. Green, we're fully recovered. We're ready to go for that day, right? What's great about Fit for 90 is it allots for other things like soreness, okay? Site soreness. If you were to click on there, it turns around, it gives you an athlete and where they're actually sore. All right, so we can, again, look over for trends. If our athlete is reporting levels of 5 in their hamstrings for 2 weeks in a row now, okay, we can allot for that, and we should have a conversation with the athlete, all right, with our athletic medicine staff, and with our coach so that they can recover and perform optimally, right? Some of the things, though, again, not every, I mean, is it perfect? Absolutely no, but it's good enough, all right? It helps us, all right? This is great if you have a budget, right? And you want to allot for this, all right? Before we did this, Google, right? Google has surveys, all right? And what's awesome about Google surveys is that it can quantify it yourself and download it into an Excel spreadsheet, all right? Go on YouTube, figure out how to plot trends, all right? And now you have an opportunity to use some subjective data, all right, and quantify it objectively so that we can look and we can look for trends over time so that we can train effectively, right? So, and if anybody has any questions about these, afterwards, I can give you, I'll give you some other sites. There's another site that I've just been privy to called sportably.com, all right? They have hundreds of questionnaires and polls and other forms of RPE-based scales, and it's all free, all right? All you have to do is sign up, All right, again, it's giving you an objective way of measuring your athletes and their readiness to train. All right, the fun part. All right, now I talked about all the subjective data. All right, we talk about the objective data, how we're doing this. Right, we are. When I started off at Princeton, all right, with Jason Gallucci, Jason comes from the Penn State days of the high intensity lifts. All right, I'm trained in the high intensity lifts. Okay, we go to failure sets. All right, they are max effort lifts. You can do the traditional high intensity of a single set to failure. You can do the multiple sets to failure. You know, you have 5-3-1 or juggernaut. We've just started toying around with APRE with some of our athletes. All right. They're all one means to an end, and they're all similar in the fact that they're easy to implement. They emphasize basic multi-joint movement. They use what we call a slow burn progression, okay, where we're praising the effort and not the result. All right, we're not praising the 1 rep max achieved. All right, we're praising if we have a 5+ on 1 week and we have the guy come back and he saddles up for 20 more pounds and hits more reps that next week. All right. They just got stronger by putting in more effort, right? So we're looking for effort-based movements here, all right, which is why failure sets work so well, all right? Failure sets also have a high carryover with the reps and reserve subjectivity, and I'm going to show you now how we do it at Princeton. All right, so Sam, could you click on the in-season card here? So this would be an in-season athlete, right? We're looking at men's basketball. This is an example of a typical in-season week. We're lifting on Monday and Wednesday, right? We'll do our basic movement, all right, and then we have our maximum effort movement for the day, right? Since we're lifting on Monday, all right, Monday will be our main lower body movement so we can recover throughout the week, right? So today's main lower body movement is a trap bar rack pull, all right? I want it done at an RIR of 9. Leave 1 in the tank, all right? I put it down there so I can make sure my athletes are reading it as much as possible so they're not just glancing through, all right, and taking it to absolute failure. So on 80%, all right, we're going for 4 to 8 reps, and we're leaving 1 rep in the tank there, okay? From there, I can keep looking at our athletes, right, and we can use that high intensity progression for a couple of weeks and see, all right, if they're finishing at 5 on week 1, they're finishing 6 on week 2, and 7 on week 3. We're having a trend where we're starting to increase our strength levels each day, all right, before I'm actually progressing them up, right? Barbell bench press would be day 2. Now we're getting closer to our competition levels, right? So do I want them to work hard? Absolutely. But again, now we're also shifting into where performance in our games are more important. All right, so RIR of 7.5. All right, could definitely do 3, could definitely do 2, possibly 3. Okay, so we're looking at 85% for 4 to 8 reps. All right, that subjectivity is going to fluctuate a little bit more, but I'd rather them leave 1 extra rep in the tank, all right, and be more recovered to play, than get that extra rep at the sake of being more sore and more fatigued for a game situation. All right, Sam, could you take us back? An off-season program is a lot easier, all right? If we're doing failure sets, all right, we're going to failure, right? Again, this autoregulation is great, all right, but not if you haven't created a culture that emphasizes technical proficiency and maximum effort when effort needs to be performed. Right? So in the off season, when I have them, especially for those shorter 6-week block, that 1 6-week block that I get with baseball, all right, you better believe that we're living sore for those 6 weeks, all right? And yes, will I look at their surveys and make sure that I'm not overtraining our guys? Absolutely. But we need to put in maximum work possible, all right? We need to put that money in the bank, all right, so that when we get to our in-season, okay, or when we're in season or when you're not with me, okay, we're still able to perform. Right, so this would be a baseball workout, right? So we have squat, we have barbell bench, we have trap bar deads. We're going to put whatever our highest, whatever we want to place our most emphasis on maximum effort first. All right, then we'll have our complementary lifts afterwards. Can you go back, Steve? Great. So objective data, right? So next slide. This is another form of autoregulation that we'll do, all right? I do use percentages with my athletes, all right? Percentage manipulation, right? So we're talking about autoregulation, right? And we're talking about controlling and listening to our central nervous system and our autonomic nervous system, right? And from basic physiology, you guys know that the CNS and the ANS are highly variable, all right? There is Brian Mann talks about all the time about the study by Jovanovic and colleagues, where in a given day your 1RM can fluctuate plus or minus 18%. Right, that's huge. To give you guys an idea, if I have a 500-pound back squatter, on a given day, I could be at 500 pounds, I could be at 405 pounds, or I could be at 590 pounds on a given day. That's how much we fluctuate. You guys have all felt it, right? You're put on 80% for 5, all right, and that bar just feels slow. It literally feels like the weight of the world's on your shoulders, right? You might not have recovered enough. You didn't get enough to eat. You know, your kids were keeping you up until 3 o'clock in the morning, right? All these things, right? Conversely, there's some days where you got 80% on the bar and you feel like you got a set of 5, you could do a set of 20 on there. You're feeling great, right? Are you stronger or weaker? No, you're just more or less ready for that day, all right? What we can look at with this and what we can look at with a high degree of fluctuation is, again, look for trends. Right? So, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. All right? But this fluctuation can be even higher with weight cutting sports. Right? I work with wrestling. Right? We have guys that don't cut. We have guys that are heavy cutters. Right? So what we do, and I got this from a strength and conditioning coach at Auburn, right, where he prescribes what they call a float to their athletes. Right? So I like to work within 10%. Right? If you work within the 18% fluctuation, right, on a given day, you're probably working way too high. Like if I'm at 80% here, all right, and I'm looking for an 18% fluctuation, I'm not going to take my athlete up to 98% for a double, right? So what we're looking at here is we're looking at our athletes and seeing how prepared they are that day. So we'll take them through their warm-up sets, all right, and we'll assess and we'll look at them and we'll look at how their technique looks, right, with my wrestlers. And I'll have conversations. You'll see me, I'm walking through my room constantly. I'm talking to my athletes. I'm asking how they're doing, all right? Most of the time, I just want to hear good coach, right? But sometimes, especially if we have a really heavy tournament, we lift on Mondays. You know, sometimes we have tournaments that last till 10 o'clock on Saturdays. Right? Our guys aren't getting home till 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So we're looking for that, and so, especially with our heavy cutting weights, our 25-pounders, our 33 guys, our 41s, all right? And we're looking at them, and that barbell just looks slow, right? I'll have them try their first working set. So if it's 3 sets of 2, this is 80% in the middle, right? And it's 3 sets of 2, and that bar just looks slow, all right? They're catching it like a starfish, or they're under pulling, and they're just trying to drop underneath that bar as much as possible and using inefficient technique, all right? I'll cut them down and I'll tell them, hey, listen, I want you to go off the cut. Make sure you report that on your card, right? Looking at that, I'll reassess to see how that barbell moves, right? If that barbell still moves slow, I'll bump them back down to their original weight. Right? I'd rather see the bar move at a high rate of force with perfect technique than them try to muscle a weight around that they have no business using for that day. All right? Conversely, my big guys, all right, that have a license to eat, all right, and they better be doing it, right? They might be feeling awesome that day. And I look at them and they're moving that bar, all right? 80%'s whipping up and almost hitting them in the chin, right? I'll tell them, hey, if you're feeling good, you can stay at that weight, all right? If you're feeling great, let's bump up, all right? But do not go over your big percentage, right? And that's how we'll look for that. And I'll tell them to record that weight down, right? With that, again, we can look for trends, right? If I have a real light guy, if I have a guy that's a heavy cutter and he's consistently using the cut, I'm going to either need to alter his 1-rep maxes, or I'm going to have a conversation with him and figure out what the issue is with his weight cut. You know, what is his issue? Is he not hydrating? Is he having a lot of issues academically? You know, all these things, I look at the surveys, right, if we're consistently in the red on our surveys, all right, that's the time to talk to the athlete and be like, hey, man, you're not holding up your end of this picture, right? I'm going to hold up my end. I'm going to try to maximize your potential at all times, all right? But if you're not regulating yourself, right, and you're trying to burn the candle at both ends, all right, it's going to lead to inefficient training and ultimately injury. Fun stuff, right? Velocity-based training, all right? So velocity-based training is really, we just started using it this year, right? We just got, through some generous teams, they afforded us to get some Tendo units, all right? And I understand velocity-based training, all right? This is kind of with, if you have your budget, okay, and it's something you want to add in, all right, this is going to be, in my personal opinion, this is the future of strength and conditioning right here, all right, in an athletic standpoint, all right? Now I get it. Your GymAware system is going to cost you, with licensure, probably around $2,500, right? A Tendo unit's not much cheaper, right? It's roughly around $1,800 per unit, right? Squats and Sciences just came out with a great piece of equipment, right, that's in the middle. It's $250, all right? Not cheap, but compared to these two, all right? And they have a very, very high very high level of reliance to the traditional Tendo and GymAware, right? There you go. To the right, those are your accelerometers, right? And right now, I've talked to coaches that absolutely love the accelerometers. The one on the top is the push band. The one on the bottom is the form collar. The form collar actually goes on the collar of the barbell. The push band is usually attached to the athlete somewhere, right? There's not enough research yet with the accelerometers for me to trust using it. That's my personal opinion, right? Again, I've talked to many coaches that absolutely love them, all right? I've talked to coaches that absolutely hate them, all right? I've talked to the coaches that don't really trust velocity-based training whatsoever, right? But at the same time, this is going to give you a more in-depth picture of what's actually going on during the workout. There we go. So we'll talk about the what and the why. You know, what exactly is velocity-based training used for? So we've all heard of the force velocity curve, right? As the weight gets heavier, the bar moves slower, right? Well, there's now been established velocity zones at submaximal weights that correlate very, very highly with your 1 rep max. So so why is that important, right? Well, this allows us to look for a more in-depth look at a daily intensity. We just talked about how much a 1 rep max can fluctuate. So now we're looking at athletes in a daily setting, all right, then just basically guessing about what they performed in a max effort lift that they were all hyped up for, that they probably smashed a lot of pre-workout and a lot of other supplements, all right, before they wanted to get in on it in a high testosterone team setting, all right, a month ago. Right? So now we can look at the days in between those test days, right? The best part is it allows for immediate intra-workout adjustments via feedback, a direct feedback loop, right? So if we look for that, all right, and we look at that direct feedback loop, we can look set by set and progress our athletes up set by set. So in a second, I will show you guys the velocity zones. But if I'm supposed to work at a set percentage and I'm supposed to be over, let's say, 0.7 meters per second, right? And that I'm smoking 0.9, all right, at that percentage. Does that mean I'm gotten stronger? Probably not, all right? That means I'm more ready for that day, okay? So let's put some more weight on the bar and let's move. All right, let's see how much we can stress the athlete, all right, in a given period of time, so that we can provide some maximal training for that athlete. And then it also allows for us to look for longitudinal progression, all right? And if anybody is really good in Excel and anybody is really good at statistics, please come and talk to me, because I've been doing this very, very painstakingly slow for this entire semester, and I'd really like some tips, okay? So anybody, you know, a good statistics guy or a good Excel guy, please, I at this point, I'll pay money for it. So we're looking for that instant feedback loop, all right? What's awesome for this, guys, is it promotes competition and effort. Just like Coach just talked about in our last in the last talk, right? having those cards up there where you have the opportunity to earn your team points, right? That's going to get you more than any set or percentage work that you can do, right? Making the athlete know that they're holding the rope for their teammates, and by putting in extra effort and competing, all right, that's where you're going to get the highest amount of carryover for what we do in the weight room, all right? You can argue with me, you can argue with this with me all you want, all right? But I certainly feel that, again, just like Coach said, when you learn how to swing a baseball, if you want to hit a baseball, you need to swing at a baseball, right? What we do in the weight room is important, don't get me wrong, but it's not as important to make the athlete better. The athlete's going to be better when they're out doing their sport, right? But if we can make what we do in the weight room competitive, just like how they get competitive out there, all right, that's where we can get the psychological carryover, right? So that's what we're looking for. And then we're promoting athlete autonomy, right? This is my second favorite thing about instant feedback, right? It gives you the opportunity to have the conversation with the athlete, to get to know the athlete, right? Again, we service hundreds of athletes a day, right? We don't want them feeling like they're just another number in our weight room, right? We need to care for everybody from the top of that depth chart all the way to the bottom, right? So when you can give the athlete an opportunity to feel like they have some control over what they're doing, right? It's going to provide, it's going to pay for itself in dividends when it comes to the buy-in factor, all right? What velocity-based training isn't, okay? This is the tip of the iceberg, right? The frosting on the cake. This is, right, the reward for technical mastery and for maximum effort, right? Do I use this with new athletes? Absolutely, all right? Because I want them to know when they're under that bar and I tell them I want them to move the bar fast, I want them to know what moving the bar fast feels like. Right? I can tell you, he could be like, I have an athlete, a new athlete, and they're like, oh, coach, I am moving that bar fast. I'm like, yeah, but I want it moved at 0.6 meters per second. You're moving at 0.4. Right? So now we can tangibly look, and we can give the athlete, and the athlete can understand how speed is quantified with us. All right? The biggest thing is the coach's coach, the monitor monitors. All right? If you choose to use velocity-based training, or if you are right now, you cannot, as a coach, let this be as an extension of your ego. Right? You need to make sure that all the athlete knows is the athlete, that device just measures speed. Right? So if we want that athlete doing a back squat, and they're turning that back squat into a squat jump so they can get a couple more meters per second on that bar, right? Or if we're doing a deadlift, and all of a sudden that athlete looks like an angry cat because they're trying to pick that bar up as fast as possible, right? Think about what you're trying to emphasize as a coach, right? We're thinking about moving bar weight fast, but it needs to be technically proficient. So, again, we're talking about the velocity zones here, all right? This is something, again, I got from Dr. Brian Mann. As the weights increase towards 100% maximal effort movement, all right, you can see the meters per second decrease, all right? This is set up for your major lifts, your squats, your benches, your deadlifts, all right? And there's a pretty high carryover. I think it's within, 0.05% between those lifts, right? Trap bar deadlift is another one that you can throw in there as well, right? And looking at this, now you can manipulate what kind of variable that you want to use. What's important to you? What's important to the demand of the sport, more importantly, right? So if I have a miler and we're trying to produce, we're trying to get maximum effort out of his, like a miler in swimming, right? Chances are we're not going to be touching weights in season that are closer to 0.5 meters per second, right? He's not going to need as much maximum effort attention as my 50 freestyler does, right? We're talking about a difference of swimming 66 laps and 2 laps here. So again, you need to assess where you actually want to be working at as a coach in respect to where your athlete is in their competition season. So I have a couple of videos that I'm going to show you right now. This is one of our starting pitchers, Ben Gross. Can you hit the one that's all the way on the left? All right. So today, that day, and I'm sorry if you guys can't see the readings on there. So we were doing doubles, all right? It was supposed to be at 55% plus band tension, all right? And I wanted him to move that weight above 0.7 meters per second, all right? Ben was consistent. This was set 2. All right, we were doing 5 sets. All right, Ben was consistently hitting 0.79. He did an extra rep on this one. 0.79, 0.83, 0.82. All right, on his second set. So that shows me that that first set wasn't a fluke. Right? So we bumped up his weight. All right, he started with 235. Okay, we bumped up his weight. His last set, he's got 265 on the bar right now. Same band tension. First rep, 0.81, gets a little bit on the balls of his feet, corrected him, all right, 0.79. So he's still in that high category of where we actually wanted him to be, all right? So what we would do with this lift, all right, I monitor it, all right? We actually did the same exact lift on Tuesday, right? He had the same percentages of work, okay, same amount of band tension, all right? He came back in, he finished at 285. So he went from a 235-pound start on 1 week to a 285-pound finish. So I'm looking towards this trend here, all right? It looks like he's trending on getting stronger, right? So the benefit for him here is this is done during midterms week. He's a second semester senior, right? So second semester senior on midterms week, he's probably pretty recovered, right? He's not too stressed, okay? Conversely, we have Chris Davis here, all right? Baseball player, position player, right? We have him on the Tendo. Again, same deal. We wanted him over 0.7 meters per second. He started at 185, all right? Chris is coming off of both the flu, all right? And he had 2 exams the day before, all right? 185 was moved at 0.62 meters per second and 0.58 meters per second, all right? So what's that show me? That shows me that he's absolutely crushed, right? So we scaled the weight back, all right? I made sure he recorded it. I recorded it in my notes, okay? We bumped the weight down 20 pounds, all right? He was consistently hitting, I think it was 0.79 and 0.82. Again, I'm sorry that we can't see these more clearly, all right? But at the same time, all right, he's able to now sustain over that meters per second that I want to prescribe. All right, so that's where he stayed in his workout. Okay, the next week we went back, reassessed. Okay, he was back over that spot. So what does that show me? All right, that tells me he just wasn't ready that day. All right, he just wasn't ready that day. And I need to look more longitudinally in how we're going to quantify his progression in the future. All right, the last video is, again, same thing. We have trap bar deadlift here. This is Sydney Chung. She's a women's water polo player. She's one of our captains on the women's water polo team. All right, they're working at a little bit higher. I want them to work more speed strength than strength speed. All right, they're working at anything above 0.8. She was consistently hitting 0.83 and higher. All right, so I know she's hitting in my zones, and that's an adequate weight to stress her for that day. So again, how do we use it? This is what a card would look like, a sample card would look like at Princeton, right? This is the workout that we just saw. All right, I believe that was Georgetown week. Okay, so no. Yeah, it was Georgetown week. So I had them, that's what I did. I bumped them down to doubles because we were during doing midterms, so I downloaded the workout a little bit. All right, but this is where we would have it. All right, you'd have your percentage here, your speed in the second column, all right, and your weight in the third column. If you changed your weight, I made sure that made sure you recorded that down. All right, after that, I take my athletes, I put them into my Excel folder. All right, I look for trends. All right, are we progressing up each week while maintaining our velocities? All right, are we not? All right, is it staggered? All right, if it's staggered, that's showing me that my athlete, for whatever reason, is more prepared or underprepared on that certain day. All right, but if I'm seeing a consistent trend line up or a consistent trend line down, all right, that's the time to have a conversation about either pushing a little bit more or pulling back. And then the last one I want us to talk about is heart rate. All right, again, we're lucky enough that we're able to use the Polar software with our athletes, okay? Those of you who don't have the budget to put in heart rate training, okay, look up and look at resting heart rate, all right, on Google, right? There's 100 ways to manipulate resting heart rate for your athletes so that you can get some adequate predictors on how they're recovering. Right? So just going over Polar Team 2. What's awesome about Team 2 is it puts everything, monitors everything in load scores, right? So you have training load blocks of levels 1 to 5, and those training load blocks account for how much recovery the athlete needs. So a level 1 is 12 hours of recovery, 2 is 12 to 24, 3 is 24 to 48, 4 is 48 to 72, and 5 is 72 plus. All right? So what we're looking at in season with our athletes, right, is we're looking to manipulate that training load score, right? With our guys that are playing heavy minutes, all right, in the Ivy League, we play Friday, Saturday, all right, we're looking on a Wednesday practice, we're looking for our starters not to be above a 3, all right? Conversely, we're looking at our guys that don't play a lot of minutes, all right, we're going to manipulate that and we're going to push our guys through that because they're not going to be playing a lot on Friday and Saturday. And what we need them to do is we need to sufficiently stress them enough that if we hit them at a 4 or a 5, they're going to be recovered enough for Monday, all right, so that Monday we can do a lot more basketball team-specific work, and that our guys that don't play a lot of minutes are going to be able to adequately stress our guys that play a lot. So real quick, I know I'm running short on time, all right, so I'm just going to go over, this is what a sample readout would look like, all right, so we have heart rate max on the left, okay, this is approximate recovery time, all right, in that recovery time spot, and then again, the training load scores are quantified off distance covered and time spent in your heart rate zones, all right, so the game of basketball is a game that's spent primarily between 80 and 100% of your heart rate max, right, so I want to look at how we make this basketball specific, all right, in that column all the way to the right. We're looking at percentage of time of practice spent above 80%, right? And from there, we can manipulate our practice times and our intensities so that we can either pull back on our athletes or push through. Does that make sense? Good? Cool. So how do we move forward at Princeton? All right, so right now, how we're using all this information this spring is we're actually using velocity-based training to track pitching velocity, all right, in either upward trends or downward trends. All right, in the future, right now we're using this just in the dynamic effort method, okay? In the future, we're gonna use this to chart maximum effort lifts. We're going to use velocity-based training to regulate failure stats instead of bar load. This is where a lot of new data is coming out on selective hypertrophy for our athletes. So we can look at to manipulate that. We're building questionnaire data and right now looking at injury rate during exam times for wrestling. All right, during our midterms for wrestling, one of our biggest tournaments falls under that time, and it's a spot where a lot of injury occurs. All right, so we're starting to look at how we can manipulate training volume, all right, around questionnaires based off of perceived stress for our athletes. All right, we can use heart rate data to establish training zones. Okay, again, I know I'm running short on time. This is an area that I've worked very, very closely with a couple of other strength conditioning coaches, Mike Bewley from Clemson, all right? And I'm really interested to see this data based off our spring, and then also using daily vertical jump testing to establish off-season averages, and then using that to determine if there's drop-off in percentage to dictate volume. So if we're doing a 1-rep counter movement in the beginning, all right, we can look, are you more or less ready? Right? If you're less ready to train, maybe we're doing less intensity and more bodybuilding-esque training, okay, where there's not as high of a neural carryover. All right? If you're more prepared to train, right, we're using maybe a higher percentage. We're looking to manipulate that float or cut chart right there. So that's really what we're going to be doing in future study at Princeton. So again, I know I'm running short on time. If anybody has any questions. There we go. Yeah, we'll get them on the back end. Again, here's my references, and then my thank yous. All right, DeVincenzi, my long last name at Princeton.edu. Right. There's our number. GoPrincetonTigers.com. All our social media is at PU Tiger Strength. All right, guys, I'm an open book and an open door. If anybody thinks that you can learn something from me, all right, please ask, all right, because I'm going to ask you as many questions as you're going to ask me because I want to learn. All right, I'm a strength coach that's in the business of learning, right? And I'm hoping that you guys got something from this, all right? I have a personal Instagram. It's at CoachMeUpJD. If you want to see some really cute pictures of my kids and some occasional lifting, that's what we got. I'd like to thank, again, Hammer Strength, the NSCA, for putting me up in front of you guys, and I hope you guys got something out of it. Thank you very much.
Quick announcement.